Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today we're going to be doing a compression masterclass. Now, don't get overwhelmed with that term. I'm going to cover all this in a very easy to follow manner, and we're going to be demonstrating the use of compression and better understanding why, when, and also how to hear compression with two extremely dynamic sources, which are the grand piano as well as a lead vocal. So let's go ahead and dive in. All the way from the start, I can feel it in my heart, like all the way from the start. All right, so I've got our two tracks here that I mentioned, the grand piano as well as the acapella vocal. And let's start with the grand piano. And so what we're going to do is utilize Pro C2. For those of you out there who are getting more familiar with compression, you want a very user-friendly interface and just something that's going to help you visually understand compression better. This is definitely the one that I would recommend. I'm going to put a direct link to it below if you want to check it out. Let's go ahead and full screen it so we can get this nice visual representation. And let's go ahead and play back the piano. And I want you to just keep an eye on the visual representation here of level. Also the green signal that's going to be coming up on our threshold line. So very dynamic performance. As you can see there, big difference between the quietest parts and the loudest parts of the piano signal. So what we're going to do first is I want to dial in some compression and just focus on the threshold and the ratio control. I want you to more importantly understand how to hear these, what they're doing audibly. The threshold is simply going to indicate at what loudest point we're going to start applying the compression. So if we lower this down, you'll see that representation of the grid here on the line. And that just says that as soon as we go above -11, our compression will engage and start to apply gain reduction. The ratio control, think of this simply as an intensity of our compression once that signal goes above the threshold. So as we go to a higher ratio, we're going to get more of an intense compression effect. I'm going to recommend to those of you who are having trouble hearing compression to dial in about 6 dB of compression initially, just so that we can hear what's going on. Now, that may seem like a lot to some of you out there, but again, this is just to start training your ears what's happening with the compression. So let's go ahead and dial that in. Okay, so you can see as I set the threshold, every time we were going over that threshold, you could see that gain reduction happening in proportion to how loud that point was. We're limiting the dynamic range. So we're taking those loudest points and we're reducing them and thereby making a more consistent dynamic and a more uniform audio signal. The attack and release, especially with something like a piano, we want to try to retain the performance and the front end transients of those keys. So in order to do that, we would set a slower attack. Now, if I set a really fast attack, you're going to hear the keys get more mushy. There's just not as much of a sharpness to them. You hear the difference as I adjust that? So something to consider, this attack control, very specific to the source, depending on, what you're compressing and what you want it to sound like. Now, the release, this is just going to control how quickly the compressor will release the signal. So if you increase this release, you're going to get much more of a longer and more intense compression effect. Let's just bounce the wave file with the compression applied, and let's take a look at that. So there you go. There's the difference. This is much more of a flat dynamic. And again, that just shows you we did make the signal significantly quieter because we are, again, just taming those loudest points. Now, the trick with compression is that it's also one of the most powerful ways to increase perceived loudness over pretty much everything in audio. The reason is because we can do what's called makeup gain or apply auto gain, which Pro C2 has this feature just to turn that on. So this is going to bring up the entire audio signal as a whole. Now we have this more consistent dynamic, but it's also brought back up to the original level. I want you to keep an eye on the level of the original performance, and then I'm going to turn this back on. So we'll have the compressed signal with auto gain, and let's see what we've got. So right there at about minus 23. So now let's turn the compression on as well as the auto gain, and let's see if we have any difference there. So very, very close. What you're seeing there is the power of perceived loudness in action because we've got essentially the same level in terms of LUFS by utilizing auto gain with the compressed signal, but this compressed signal now is perceived much louder. All right, so moving over to the vocal, I want to talk about how a vocal can really train your ears with compression because it can point out a lot of the things that compression can do that are not so pleasing to the ear if you get carried away with it. And there's a lot of subtleties in a vocal that you want to keep an ear for. So let's go ahead and open the compressor again. I'm going to play this back dry, and then we're going to process this a little bit and talk about some of the things that you want to look out for when you're compressing a vocal and how to do it in a way that is going to strengthen the performance, not take away from it.
Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me 'cause it's killing you slowly. I almost died trying to save you till I realized that I can't do. When you hurt yourself, I hurt too.
Once again, another dynamic performance. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of slightly over compress this. Then I want you to take a listen to what happens to this vocal. We're going to point out a couple of things.
Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me 'cause it's killing you slowly. I almost died trying to save you till I realized that I can't do. When you hurt yourself, I hurt too.
So you can clearly hear overly compressed signal. Now when we apply auto gain, bring it back up to where it needs to be. Now listen very closely.
Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me 'cause it's killing you slowly. I almost died trying to save you till I realized that I can't do. When you hurt yourself, I hurt too. I pray to God that
By compressing this signal and then utilizing the auto gain, we're bringing up a lot of the quieter aspects of the vocal, which includes room ambience. You probably heard a little bit of that if you listen closely. You're also bringing up the sibilants or the S's. You can hear that they got much harsher. And you're also hearing that the breaths in the performance came up to be just as loud as everything else. It's basically saying everything in the performance is of equal importance, which should not be the case. So you want to be very, very careful about how you set this because if you overly compress a vocal, you're setting yourself up to do a lot more work later. You're going to have to automate breaths. You may have to automate parts of the performance to give it dynamics. all kinds of things that if you just didn't over compress the vocal, you wouldn't have to deal with. So let's bring it back to a more realistic vocal compression setting, something that's going to retain the performance and also fit better in the context of the mix.
Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me, 'cause it's killing you slowly. I almost died trying to save you, till I realized that I can't do. When you hurt yourself, I hurt too.
Much more pleasant compression there, keeping more consistency. So now we'll turn on auto gain, and then we're going to compare it with it bypassed, and then we'll engage it.
Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me, 'cause it's killing you slowly. Every curse, every lie, every drink, every vice, it's killing me, 'cause it's killing you slowly. I almost died trying to save you, till I realized that I can't do. When you hurt yourself, I hurt too.
So much more consistent performance now, higher perceived loudness. And in the context of the mix with instrumentation, you're not going to be picking up on all those things that we talked about. Yes, some of that does come up, but not nearly as much, and it's not going to be noticeable as if you over compress a vocal. This is actually how I compressed her vocal for the song. And so just keeping in mind that you can train your ears with compression very easily by focusing on vocals, because all the things that are wrong with it when you over compress it are going to be very noticeable to you. All right, y'all. So that was our deep dive into hearing and understanding compression, knowing when and why to use it and how much of it to use. You can train your ear to what's happening, how that compressor is reacting with the signal, and making adjustments from there. You're going to get more and more comfortable with this. So I hope this is helpful, y'all. If you have any questions about compression or anything that we covered here, feel free to leave a comment below. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. And we'll talk to you soon.